The ATF has built a reputation over decades that frustrates gun owners and collectors more than it reassures them. A federal agency should inspire confidence, showing that it protects communities, punishes violent criminals, and respects the rights of citizens. Instead, the ATF often finds itself in the spotlight for failures, overreach, and actions that look more like harassment than public safety. That reputation is exactly why the Trump administration's plan to slash their funding and authority hit so hard. It is not just another budget fight in Washington. It is a statement that this agency has gone too far for too long. Back in the 1980s, Congress passed the Firearm Owners Protection Act. It was not written because lawmakers suddenly wanted to favor gun owners. It came directly from evidence that the ATF was spending its time in the wrong places. A study revealed that around 75% of their cases during that period did not target violent criminals, smugglers, or traffickers. Instead, they went after ordinary firearm owners and collectors for paperwork errors. Think about that. Instead of chasing gangs moving weapons across borders, they punished people who made clerical mistakes. When an agency behaves like that, the public cannot trust it. This law was meant to rein them in, but the culture inside the ATF didn't change. The shotgun fiasco around the same era made things worse. Certain shotguns were reclassified, and ATF agents stormed into licensed firearm dealers to seize inventory that had already been approved for sale. These businesses followed the rules, invested their money, and stocked their shelves with products cleared by the federal government. Overnight, those same products were labeled illegal, and shop owners were left with empty shelves and massive losses. Lawsuits piled up, but accountability never truly landed on the agency. For many in the community, the lesson was chilling. Even if you played by the rules, the ATF could ruin you without warning. Fast forward to the mid-2000s, and the Richmond gun show incident shows the same pattern. People who attended a perfectly legal event discovered later that the ATF had collected their personal information, photographed license plates, and essentially built a database of law-abiding citizens.
None of those people were accused of crimes. They were exercising their constitutional rights. Yet the government decided to treat them like suspects just for showing up. When word spread, outrage followed. People were right to ask if the ATF can casually track every individual at a gun show. What stops them from expanding surveillance even further? These scandals don't exist in isolation.
They build on one another, painting a picture of an agency more interested in numbers and easy targets than in actual safety. Every one of these operations cost taxpayers money, and every one of them left communities less trusting of the federal government. Instead of focusing resources on violent crime, the ATF pursued technical violations and paperwork errors because they were simple to catch. That is not the mission most Americans believe they are funding. Meanwhile, other agencies already cover the responsibilities that actually matter. Local police departments patrol neighborhoods, state agencies enforce laws, and the FBI investigates major criminal networks. The ATF sits on top of that structure, duplicating efforts at best and creating new problems at worst. To many, that redundancy is the heart of the issue. America doesn't need another agency draining resources while trampling over citizens who try to follow the law. The failures of the 1980s and 2000s laid the groundwork for everything that followed. By the time Congress revisited the ATF's record in later years, the pattern was undeniable. The Richmond gun show was not an exception. It was another link in a chain of behavior that valued statistics over results, bureaucracy over safety, and intimidation over accountability. Each scandal added to the argument that the ATF does not simply fail from time to time. It fails consistently. And when a federal agency shows that kind of record, eventually, someone in power is going to act. The scandals of the 1980s and early 2000s set the stage. But what came next took things to an entirely new level. The Fast and Furious operation, launched in the mid-2000s, was sold as a bold strategy to take down cartels. Agents allowed straw buyers to purchase more than 2,000 firearms, the idea being that these guns could be tracked to higher-level criminals. In reality, The weapons disappeared into cartel hands, and tracking efforts collapsed almost immediately. One of those guns was later used to murder a U.S. Border Patrol agent. That single fact is damning enough. But the broader picture revealed by congressional investigations showed layers of incompetence and negligence. Instead of catching criminals, the ATF armed them. When families of victims demanded answers, they encountered stonewalling and blame shifting. Reports detailed massive failures in oversight and a reckless disregard for consequences. Critics pointed out that no other law enforcement agency would be allowed to gamble with public safety on such a scale. For ordinary gun owners, the message was clear: if the ATF could create this disaster while claiming to fight crime, what else might they be doing behind closed doors? Trust was shattered. By the early 2010s, the pattern repeated itself in Operation Fearless. The ATF rented storefronts, set them up as supposed businesses, and waited for criminals to walk in and incriminate themselves. The plan looked clever on paper, but quickly devolved into embarrassment. Firearms were lost, sensitive documents were left behind, and one fully automatic M4 rifle simply vanished. Communities were left with legitimate fears that weapons intended to be locked away were now on the streets because of government negligence. It became another example of why many believe the ATF is not just ineffective, but dangerous. Older scandals continued to echo as well. Ruby Ridge in the 1990s remains a symbol of federal overreach, where an operation spiraled out of control and left civilians dead, including a child. Waco, in 1993, became infamous after a raid escalated into a siege ending in tragedy with dozens of deaths. The ATF's role in both events left permanent scars on public perception. Even decades later, these names are invoked whenever people discuss the dangers of unchecked federal power. For many Americans, the ATF is defined not by the criminals it caught, but by the innocent lives lost in operations that were poorly planned and brutally executed. The problems were not limited to field operations. Inside the agency, whistleblowers revealed a scheme where desk employees were classified as law enforcement, allowing them to receive inflated paychecks. Over 5 years, this waste cost taxpayers at least $5 million. And some insiders suggested the real figure could be much higher. At the same time, reports surfaced of firearms stolen from ATF storage facilities. Millions of dollars worth of weapons vanished. An agency whose sole purpose is to regulate and track firearms could not even secure its own inventory. That level of incompetence undermines any claim of authority. The common theme running through all of this is not random bad luck, it is systemic failure. From Fast and Furious to Operation Fearless from Ruby Ridge
In Waco, from inflated salaries to missing guns, the ATF has shown again and again that it cannot manage its responsibilities. Meanwhile, other agencies already exist to fight crime effectively. Local police know their communities, state law enforcement answers to elected officials, and the FBI takes on organized networks.
The ATF adds nothing that justifies its continued abuse of taxpayer money. Critics argue that the ATF is redundant and built on bad actors. Looking at its history, that argument is hard to refute. This is not an agency that occasionally stumbles. This is an agency that consistently fails, leaves tragedy in its wake, and doubles down on practices that alienate the very citizens it claims to serve. The longer this continues, the clearer it becomes that reform alone is not enough.
Structural change or outright reduction is the only path forward. Decades of scandals, wasted dollars, and tragic failures eventually pushed the debate to a breaking point. What we are watching now is not a small adjustment or another round of congressional hearings. The Trump administration has taken a hammer to the foundation of the ATF, and the proposed 2026 budget proves it.
Almost 30% of the agency's funding is being stripped away, reducing staff from more than 5,000 to about 3,600. That is not a trim around the edges. It is a near collapse of scale for an agency that once imagined expanding to 10 or even 12,000 employees. Those numbers matter, but the meaning behind them matters more. Fewer agents mean fewer bureaucrats knocking on the doors of law-abiding gun shops, fewer surveillance campaigns at local shows, and fewer resources wasted on regulations that millions of gun owners already know are nonsense. Cutting nearly a third of the workforce also saves hundreds of millions of dollars.
That is money that will no longer fund operations that lose firearms, misclassify employees, or design new ways to harass collectors over clerical mistakes.
One of the most significant changes is the removal of more than 500 industry operations investigators. These are the people who target federal firearms license holders, comb through records, and close businesses over technical errors. For years, they have operated like a pressure tool against shop owners who already try to follow the law. Eliminating most of those positions is a massive relief for small businesses constantly worried that a typo could cost them everything. At the same time, the Justice Department has considered merging the ATF into the DEA. That possibility speaks volumes. It means even inside Washington, leaders are recognizing what critics have said for years. The ATF is redundant. Other agencies already handle organized crime, drugs, and trafficking. Keeping the ATF as a standalone body has never made sense, and the momentum toward consolidation suggests that the days of hiding behind bureaucratic overlap may finally be ending. Leadership changes also send a clear message. Longtime figures have been pushed out and new faces brought in. The departure of senior officials like Richardson and the arrival of interim leadership under Driscoll show that the administration is not satisfied with symbolic gestures. Combined with the mandate given to the Department of Government Efficiency to wipe out more than 50 regulations
by the middle of 2025, it paints a picture of real reform. These are not tweaks.
They are dismantling moves designed to strip away the authority that has been abused for decades. For everyday gun owners, the impact will be tangible. Fewer agents mean less intimidation at the local level. Fewer investigators mean less fear for shop owners trying to keep their doors open. Fewer regulations mean fewer sudden bans on items people already own legally. All of that adds up to an environment where citizens can exercise their rights without looking over their shoulders for the next arbitrary crackdown. Critics insist that cutting the ATF will undermine public safety. But the record tells a different story. The ATF has armed cartels through Fast and Furious, lost its own weapons in storage scandals, and turned lawful paperwork mistakes into headline cases. Real safety comes from local police accountable to their communities and from federal agencies that actually target criminals. The ATF has never been indispensable. It has been a drain. The bottom line is simple. Fewer armed bureaucrats with the power to strip away constitutional rights means more freedom, more accountability, and more trust between citizens and government. Every dollar not wasted on inflated paychecks or abandoned storefronts is a dollar that stays with taxpayers. Every reduction in authority is a safeguard against another scandal. The ATF has had decades to prove its worth and has failed every time. Shrinking it, merging it, or even dismantling it altogether is not just a smart move. It is long overdue.